See.
The Citadel.
I assure you, sir, my gate is perfectly secure. Nothing could go wrong.
Your duty lies at my side now.
Stay alert.
This game have an AFK timer. Because we're just gonna AFK here.
Not now.
I'm turning off bloom. The bloom is a little bit... Is there like a bloom slider?
Over here are a number of Asura gates that lead to various cities.
I mean, it's nice, but it's like overblown bloom.
To escape in a hurry. Perhaps to find adventure.
Feels a
Or
bit too
even
dreamy.
when your architectural dreams are shattered by a giant concrete crustacean. Moving on. Remember, folks, a
Color
generous tip is an
tint.
appreciated tip.
Distortion, light rays. Oh, that's nice. Oh well, I guess we're just gonna have super massive bloom. Alright, we're gonna watch some Chris Wilson.
It's a pleasure.
Give me a sec. Where are the comments? Need the comments. Oh, Charlene's home. Give me a sec.
Why you want to eat your like that? Right?
It's a pleasure.
But not those girls.
Motivation. Extra motivation.
Okay, I'm back. Let's get this stream on the road.
Nice day.
Okay. I forgot you can do that in this game. You can dodge in this game. Alright. I also have a mount, don't I? Free. This game eats your mouse input. You can't like move your mouse to the outside. Is there a way to turn that off? How do we stop this game from eating my mouse? I don't know if I can change that. Use free camera. Prevents the camera from realigning from behind your character. Mouse steer to reset the camera. Interesting. Camera teleports at the player in the short range teleports. We have camera shake off. Disable camera player camera shake. Oh, okay. Stream file only when your connection is idle. Ah. Okay. Well, we just have to like alt tab, I guess. We'll just have to alt tab. Where is anatomy for... Oh, I can't really actually... What if I move this up here? Put that up there. And then turn this on. That should capture that. Put that over here. I don't want to make it too big, so it's like if I make it too big, I'm stealing their content. If I make it small enough, it's just like contextual, right? Make it really, really small. There we go. Right, we need another window. New tab. Wait, not new tab, new window. Yeah, and then we'll use this for reference. So I have something to look at.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson. Today I'm going to be chatting with Arthur Bruno, the founder of Crate Entertainment and the creator of the action RPG Grim Dawn. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because Arthur took an entirely different approach to most aspects of the business model of his game and the structure of his studio than we did back when I co-founded Grinding Gear Games. Thanks for joining me, Arthur. To many of our viewers, you won't need an introduction, but some people aren't familiar with the creators of their favorite games. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey Chris, it's always great talking with you. I'm Arthur Bruno. I'm the founder and creative director of Crate Entertainment. Been in the game industry for about 25 years now. I kind of got into it by accident at a time when, you know, there weren't any colleges or anything for game development. And I just
People are so
played Age of
lucky.
Empires at school and became one of the top players, and then Ensemble asked me to do some work for them and said, hey, you should apply for a design position, which, you know, was wild because it didn't even occur to me that you could have a job working in games.
That's very cool.
So yeah, I did like a little playtesting work on Age of Kings, and then one of the co-founders of Ensemble asked me to join his startup studio, Ironlore, which was working on an ARPG that eventually evolved into Titan Quest. So I was just like one of the first guys working in a windowless one-room basement office in Sudbury, Massachusetts, trying to get a publishing deal for Titan Quest, and then basically helped hire up the design team. Saw that game through to completion, worked on the Immortal Throne expansion, and then I founded my own company in, I guess it was 2009, so it's been a while now, Crate Entertainment. At Crate, I was able to work out a deal to use the Ironlore engine since, the Titan Quest engine, since Ironlore had gone out of business at that point. It was a wild idea because, you know, I didn't really have any investors or anything. I was just paying for everything out of pocket. But, you know, I thought that, hey, there's no other action RPGs on the coming to market, and, you know, Titan Quest sold over 1 million copies. So, you know, if I could do something rough and small scope and capture even like 10% of that audience, it could be a stepping stone to something else. And then, you know, Path of Exile caught us by surprise. Torchlight appeared out of nowhere, and then later on in development, Diablo 3 was announced. So, you know, I was really scrambling, trying to figure out how
God.
to be competitive in this market. So I launched a Kickstarter, was able to hire up some guys who come out of 38 Studios at the time. We got it to early access in 2012, and then just kept putting all of the money back into the development of the game until we finally launched in 2016. And you know, and it's funny because I originally thought, man, if we could sell like 500k copies, that would be amazing. And since then, we've gone on to sell like 10 times that number. And it's put us in this position where
Wait,
now,
500K?
you know, we have like the freedom
Dude.
and flexibility to just
It's like 5 million
do what
then?
we want,
Wait.
work on projects that interest us, and, you know, take whatever time we need to, you know, make the product meet our expectations.
Yeah.
That's a very cool
5
story,
million.
and there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. Let's start with Titan Quest. I remember this game fondly. As my viewers know, I played a lot of Diablo 2 back in the day, but that segued into a lot of Titan Quest. You know, one of the reasons Path of Exile exists is that after Titan Quest, there were no other action RPGs being made. Like, exactly the same feeling you felt when you started on Grim Dawn is basically there was just a silence, and it felt like there was an opportunity in the market. And so this was off the back of an awful lot of Titan Quest play between me and my friends. Jonathan in particular, I remember we basically lived in the same room playing Titan Quest for a number of weeks there.
That's awesome. Cool to hear.
So on Titan Quest, you mentioned some of your responsibilities, but can you go into more detail about what your role was and what you worked on in that game?
Yeah, Brian Sullivan, who was one of the co-founders of Ironlore, had heard about, you know, my work helping with multiplayer playtesting on Age of Kings, and got in contact with me, and I eventually went down, and they you know, made me an offer. But this was before they had a contract, you know, publisher funding to develop the game. So I was kind of working on like an hourly basis. I was, you know, driving like an hour into the office a couple of days a week, and had no idea if this was going to go anywhere. And I think kind of like the sunk cost fallacy kept me going, because it took 3 years to get a contract. So, you know, the more time I put in, I'm like, man, I gotta see this through. I'm gonna, you know, make it to the end. We've got to make this publishing deal happen. And during that time, I had played Diablo 1. I actually did not play a lot of Diablo 2 because I was, you know, swept up in RTS fever. And then later got into MMOs. But, you know, obviously they wanted to make an ARPG, so I'm like, I gotta learn everything I can about ARPGs. And I started playing Diablo 2, and, you know, I became addicted to it. I played, just thousands of hours of Diablo 2. And, like, me and one of the other guys, an engine programmer who went on to found Unknown Worlds, would just be up until, like, 4 a.m., or sometimes we wouldn't even go to sleep. We just play Diablo 2 all night, sleep in our chairs, and then wake up and start working on, Titan Quest again. And during that time, I just applied a lot of the lessons that I had learned as a player for what worked and what I thought could be improved in Diablo 2 to the design of Titan Quest. And I was given like pretty much free reign to just design the ARPG. So I was there just working on the design for like 3 years until we finally got a contract and were able to hire up the rest of the design team. So I worked on like pretty much every part of the game, designed I think almost all the major features, and then was just led the gameplay team in implementing everything, fleshing out the game, doing all of the itemization, setting up all the monsters and the boss battles. I did a fair bit of like level development and then helped plan the Immortal Throne expansion. And while that was being worked on, I was tasked with trying to create and pitch other projects, but none of those really came to fruition.
Well, you did an amazing job with Titan Quest, and thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yes. So, as you mentioned, this led on to Grim Dawn when you licensed the Titan Quest technology. What were your goals with Grim Dawn? Like, what did you set out trying to achieve there?
So, honestly, I felt a little frustrated working on Titan Quest because, there were certain aspects of the game that I thought could be a lot better. Some of it was that when you're working for a publisher, you sign up for, a milestone list of what you're going to deliver. And to change anything on that milestone list is very difficult during development because, you have to it's like, say you have an idea for like a great new feature or whatever. Well, you don't necessarily have time in the schedule to work on that, so now you have to cut something. But to cut something, you have to go meet with your project managers and convince the publisher that it's, worth making this change. And so typically that just doesn't happen. There were a couple of times when I wanted to do things and, management was like, well, it's too much of a hassle. Like we have these deliverables, this is on the schedule, there's just, no realistic way to get this done.
Right. Whereas on your own project, you can just do it.
Yeah. There's nobody here to tell me I can't add a feature, which, sometimes
Hell
is
yeah.
another thing, but I think generally works out for the players. And then on top of
That's
that,
how you do it.
there was, I feel like, really this kind of misguided attempt from the top to make this very, like, family-friendly. And so we weren't allowed to have blood and gore or even really, like, hit effects. And I don't know that the game necessarily needs to be gory, although, I think a lot of the audience enjoys that. And I do myself. But without that, without any kind of hit effects, you don't have very good feedback or like a satisfying feel to combat. And we did get a lot of criticism about that after launch, where I think somebody likened combat to like cutting wheat or something, because there was no like meaty impact. There were not a lot of like flashy feedback when you killed or hit an enemy. There were no death effects or anything like that. So it was a lot of, I think stuff like that. There were a lot of things that I learned over the course of Titan Quest development that I didn't get to apply because systems had already been created, and to go back and redo them would have just been too painful during development. We didn't have time to do that. So when it came to Grim Dawn, I was just, it was like a chance to do everything all over again, but the way that, I wanted it to be.
That's really cool.
A little self-indulgent, but...
Yeah. I never noticed the combat feel that you're talking about in Titan Quest until you mention it now. And then thinking back, I do agree, like, as a, decades later, as a game developer,
Yeah.
obviously it's, the effects that you're talking about do make it more punchy.
Where do I have
As
to
a
go?
gamer, I'm so focused on items.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's difficult as a designer, is that oftentimes there are ways in which the game is not best meeting,
What?
the player's needs, or it's not providing the level of satisfaction it could, but players don't necessarily know why. And you have to try to interpret that or figure out what that is. Like, for example, there was a time during development where people kept complaining to me that Titan Quest felt slow. The combat felt slow. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, like, man, it's timed out pretty, comparatively to like Diablo 2, and like I was very hesitant to increase the speed. because as I'm sure you know, when you're working with like itemization and skills where they have a lot of like speed bonuses, you have to plan for an end game where things can become ridiculously fast. So you can't have your base level be too fast. And I was really resistant to changing it, and I got a lot of like pressure from the president to make these changes, and but I really wanted to think about it, and eventually after analyzing it for a long time, I realized that there was like a discrepancy between when the hit visually looked like it was happening in the animation and when the sounds were playing, and when we fixed that. Yeah, because a part of it is like the human brain, like you can kind of unconsciously perceive that something's wrong, but you don't know exactly what it is. It just feels bad. And part of it was that it just felt bad to people. And they were saying it felt slow. And then it turned out once we fixed this and synced everything up, everybody's like, oh wow, this feels, great. Did you make the game faster? It's like, nah, we just fixed the hit calls.
That's really interesting. It reinforces the thing that Mark Rosewater, one of the designers of Magic the Gathering, has said, which is that, listen to the player's feedback, it's important, but don't necessarily listen to the solutions. Listen to the problems and find an appropriate solution. In this case, fixing the sound timing was a good solution rather than just speeding it up to mask the problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think always you have to listen to the feedback because it's, if players are complaining about something, then something's wrong. But oftentimes it takes some detective work and really looking at the numbers to figure out what exactly it is. I mean, we had another thing in development on Titan Quest where people were play testing one of the new skill masteries, and I don't know, I think it was like Volcanic Orb or something. It was like one of the Earth Mastery skills. They were saying like, oh, the skill just seems really weak. It seems very underpowered. And I was busy and I didn't get around to making changes, but the effects artist had checked in new effects for it, sound effects and visual effects. And the next, couple days later, they're playtesting it and they're like, oh, wow, this skill feels like great now. I think it might even be overpowered. And then I had made no change. And then the best part is literally a day after that, the engineer who was working on the skills came to me and said, oh, by the way, I just found out that Volcanic Orb is totally broken. It's never done any damage. So it went from underpowered to overpowered based on visual effects, and the skill wasn't actually doing any damage.
Yep. We had similar things with Path of Exile where, the players would have opinions about the balance of certain things, and later you find out, oh, it's never worked. That thing has never, ever done the increase that it says. It's just been at 0% the whole time. And we were convinced, we were making changes going, it feels a lot better now. The player's like, yeah, good job. And, the thing never functioned. I think that I may be wrong about this, but my memory is that, bow damage increases in classic Diablo 2 didn't work, or something like that, for quite a while after release, and, it's just really hard to tell. I mean, nowadays, of course, we've got unit testing and more mature ways of developing stuff where it's a bit less cowboy, but, it's interesting that the game is so great, Yeah. So, talking about the start of Grim Dawn, I vividly remember your Kickstarter crowdfunding in April of 2012, because we launched our Path of Exile crowdfunding in the same month, though not on Kickstarter. We decided to use our own site because I wanted to save the 5%. Your campaign did incredibly well. We were watching it and super, super pleased to see that I believe it raised over $500,000 that month. So what did the success unlock, and what constraints did the crowdfunding create for the project?
I mean, the big success is that I went from a guy who was paying for a little bit of art and volunteer work out of my pocket to all of a sudden I could actually hire some, full-time employees, and that really accelerated development because we really kind of like one of the main guys that who had been doing volunteer work on it had a kid and had a new job, and things really slowed down, and I reached a point where I was thinking like, geez, is this ever going to happen? I need to do something, otherwise this game's never going to go out, and how many years of my life can I devote to working on this without pay? So we did the Kickstarter, and all of a sudden a couple of people came on, and I got super lucky. I didn't realize this at the time. I mean, I've always known that they're great good guys, and I enjoyed working with them. They do good work. But I don't think I really appreciated how amazing some of the initial people that I hired were, until like later on, and we had to go through the struggle of trying to grow the company, and it found that it was very hard to find, other people out there who were, met the kind of caliber of people that I just kind of lucked out with early on in my first hires. But, that greatly accelerated the pace of development, but it also put me in this position where I had this doomsday spreadsheet of, how many months is it until I run out of money and I can't pay people. And, all of that pressure of not only providing for people's livelihoods, but the fact that I had just taken these people's money, into all the Kickstarter donations, and now I had to deliver a product that I, wasn't fully sure how I was going to get from point A to point B with that.
That's rough.
I remember waking up at nights, like shortly after the Kickstarter, in like a cold sweat, thinking, oh my God, how am I gonna finish this game? Like, how am I gonna, put a product out that these people donated for? And in my head, I had imagined at some point maybe we would have to sign on with a publisher, but like if we could get the game far enough completed, it would at least give us some leverage to make a good deal. And I did talk to some publishers at one point as we were, that my doomsday spreadsheet was counting down. But I just always felt like if we had accepted one of those deals, we would end up in a similar position that we were in at Ironlord, where you're kind of like on a treadmill towards a cliff that you're going to fall off of when, if you can't line up the next project fast enough before, your initial funding runs out. And also we wouldn't have ownership over the IP, which, I think would make things very restrictive in terms of what we're able to do. And I mean, that just the whole like management structure you need for reporting when dealing with, investors or a publisher. At one point I even explored this crazy deal with a mining company where one of the guys is actually based in Australia, but I guess he was a huge Titan Quest fan. And I guess he was saying that, investment in mining is sort of similar to the type of investment that we would need in games, because they apparently they spend a lot of money just doing exploration to see even if there are.
I'm too used to torrent. I keep pressing shift.
Before you can actually create a product to market. But yeah, that didn't quite work out, and so eventually, I just kind of kept going. But Steam Early Access became a thing, and once I knew that we could get the game out in Steam Early Access, that took a lot of pressure off, because I was like, all right, we can release something, because I felt like we had a really good bit of content, and I felt like the game felt very good at that point. It just needed a lot more content. So I think it was like either 2012 or 2013 we did the Steam Early Access, and it.
I just realized the nipple looks kind of weird.
Big or anything initially, but it provided enough income that we could just keep development going, and have the time that we need to eventually make the product we were finally able to make.
How many staff did you have working on it at that stage?
I mean, immediately after the Kickstarter, I think I might have had like 3 or 4 people, not including myself. And then by the time that we released Grim Dawn, we were up to 7 people, I think.
God, it's amazing you made such a good game with such a small team. I mean,
yeah, it's actually funny because I feel like people don't really believe that from the outside, or think that we worked like crazy crunch, which, I mean, I did in those initial years, but like, now we're still a very small studio, but like we don't crunch or anything really. It was always very awkward when I was initially hiring people, and they're like, well, how big is, your team? So it's 7 people, but we made Grim Dawn, and I think people like can't quite do that math in their head of like, how does that make sense?
I had a similar experience where when we released Path of Exile, we were shopping around to find a publisher for Southeast Asian regions like Taiwan and so on. Eventually we signed with Garena, who we were happy with, but we talked to another publisher as part of, courting different ones, and they were very clear with their rejection of us. I vividly remember them saying, okay, look, we like the game, we think it's going to do great, but we're not going to publish it because your team is 22 people, and we feel that to run live operations for this, you need another 100 people. And we said, oh, okay, what would they do? That 100 people that we're just going to hire? and they go, oh no, there's so much stuff to do. And on one hand, they were completely wrong. We published the game just fine with our 22 people. But on the other hand, they're right, because, you know, GGG in its current form has grown to hundreds and hundreds of people, and they are all doing useful things. And it enables the very large-scale live service stuff that I think that publisher was expecting the game to grow to. So it was prescient for them to say that, but at the time we thought that's crazy to just incur, you know, to incur $8 million a year of extra costs for no benefit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but man, getting your game made with, you know, a team of 7 people or less is very impressive. I understand how difficult that would be.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just, I think, the fact that we're all remote and we don't have any kind of, you know, there's no extraneous...
They're basically the same size as
like,
bare metal.
player, really,
Hey,
no
guys.
bureaucracy,
Come
we
down.
don't really have meetings. We're not spending time on things that don't make sense because, you know, a publisher wants us to put out a demo or, you know, this or that, whatever. So, I don't know, things are just very... I mean, that we're just very streamlined. Like, we don't have any just pure concept artists in the company.
Yeah, it was. It finished
You know,
a few
'cause
minutes
early
ago.
on, I didn't have money for it. But I also just came to the conclusion, like, well, there's lots of good character artists out there who also can concept. So why not just hire people like that and then, you know, make a concept? And I think it works out especially well because a lot of times, like, if you look at big AAA studios, the type of concept art that they're often churning out is, like, way overdeveloped.
Yeah, it's good for marketing and for, you know, art books and that kind of stuff, but it's more detailed than the sculptors or low poly people actually need.
Yeah, so, like, I mean, a lot of times we just are like, hey, do, like, a line drawing to start
What?
out,
What's
a
up?
bunch of line drawings, and we'll pick one that we like and then develop it maybe.
Give me a sec. Alright, I'm back.
Maybe a little bit further, but, you know, still we try to keep things, like, as rough and fast as possible, just to, you know, because it's all just an intermediary product.
I wonder if there's an incentive where artists would really prefer to work on high detail things because it makes great portfolio pieces and they can be super proud of these amazing illustrations they've done.
Yeah, well, I think there's that, and I think also, you know, people who are concept artists get into it because they love drawing. And it would be like if you asked a, you know, 3D
Make a great
modeler,
portfolio
like, just
piece.
model, just, you know, half finish the model. We don't need the full model. You know, don't bother wasting too much time texturing it.
Yeah, we just want the front.
Yeah, just do the low poly and you know, just put some primary colors on it. You know, that would be very
This
unsatisfying.
area is a bit weird.
So I understand, you know,
Needed.
how things get pushed in that sort of overdeveloped direction. But yeah, I mean, the problem is it's an intermediary product that, other than, you know, a few samples potentially making it to an art book, nobody's ever really going to see.
Yeah, I guess it's useful to have a few super high resolution pieces for your, you know, booth somewhere at Gamescom, but aside from that, you know, you don't actually need the detail for actually creating the assets.
Yeah, and you can always hire out for that.
You can always
or
use
marketing
AI.
art, or honestly, most of our marketing art is just done in house. Like, we have a
It's a
couple
joke.
of guys who are 3D modelers, but they're
It's an out of season
also,
April Fool's joke.
very good 2D artists. And are they the best 2D marketing artists available? No, probably not. But like, it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, somewhere on the internet there are a lot of artists super angry at us now, but
Yeah, probably.
The reality is, I suspect that for AAA games, ones that really want to push the fine fidelity, then they will benefit from the super high quality concept art. But for us, especially with a top-down perspective, we have different goals with the way we develop our art, especially cost cutting.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it too. Is for an isometric game, or especially a very zoomed out game like a Town Builder, it's like the level of detail is not viewable from typical camera angles. So spending too much time developing that in 2D just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I understand. So you mentioned that Crate is an entirely remote development studio, and this is fascinating to me because I didn't really enjoy COVID. Like, Grinding Gear Games was very much set up to be a crowd around a monitor and make a game with your friends in person kind of setup. And that was a lot of fun. And running a studio remotely where you don't actually get to interact with people face to face was really hard for me. And so I've seen the amazing success you've had just, doing it remotely, and I'm sure this comes with many advantages, like, being able to hire people all over the world or whatever. Can you talk about why you set up the studio like that, and how much of a difference it made when COVID hit, and, because you already potentially had your remote workflows all set up completely at that point?
Yeah, the why is very easy. It was lack of money. Early on, like, we were so bare bones that, I just couldn't. I actually went around and looked at some commercial property at one point, but like I just couldn't pull the trigger on signing a lease because it was, it seemed like so much money relative to the, fixed amount that we had at that point after the Kickstarter. And then, we were in early access for a number of years, and we didn't have like a lot of extra money even then. So there was always this dream of, man, someday we're gonna release this game and we'll make some money and we'll finally be able to open an awesome office. And then that day eventually came, and we were like, well, where should the office be? And I remember spending a bunch of time like looking around at a map for an area that seemed like it'd be cool to have an office. It was kind of like centrally located based on where people had ended up in Massachusetts over the years. And it was like a lot of people were going to have, a 30, 45-minute drive. And, I myself am thinking like, God, I'm a little bit of a recluse, so I'm like, I just can't imagine having to actually put on pants and get in a car and, commute to an office every day. And it was kind of, I think, a relief for everybody when, I finally said, hey, look, I don't think we're going to open an office. Like, things just are working really great the way that they are now. And nobody, seems excited about having an office. And I think it's provided a lot of benefits. I mean, obviously a big one would be that COVID had no effect on us, really, other than my kids were home all the time. But, for the most part, like, we just kept working as we always had. But beyond that, there's a lot of other, benefits in terms of, like, lifestyle. And I think that they benefit the company too, because it's, I think, impossible to have a human being come in and sit at a desk for, like, really, in the game industry, it's going to end up being like, 9 or 10 hours a day a lot of the time. Even if it's not, mandated, it's like people are they want to finish their work, they're passionate about the thing they're working on. But like, just sitting in an office continually is, it burns you out. And then oftentimes it's just inconvenient. Like, I honestly, having worked remote for so long, I don't understand how regular, like, people who work at a regular, like, physical company get anything done, because, half the time during the day I have to go run errands, or my wife needs me to pick up the kids a certain day, and I'm thinking, like, how do two people who, work in a physical office place, like, find time to get all this stuff done? But meanwhile, you know, at a remote company, it's like people can go out and mow the lawn or work in their garden or run an errand during the day. It's no big deal. And then they come back and they just put in the extra hours at night. And I think that for the most part, people probably end up working more hours because it's so easy to sit down at your computer and chip away at something. You know, as opposed to like having all of your
Very
stuff
true.
on a PC at work, where you'd have to drive into the office if you wanted.
But then your home is like your work now.
How do you handle communication with like documentation and stuff? Like, are you a documentation heavy company? Do you have like an open Discord call going all the time so people can hear what's going on? Like, how do you disseminate information?
No, I am famously anti-documentation. I'm pretty bad at it, even when we probably could use some more in certain cases. But like, I remember when I was working on Titan Quest, they told me, well, you know, one of your jobs.
Documentation is good if you have a
as
larger
designers, you need to
studio.
put together a design document. I'm like, you know,
Think.
but why do we have to have this?
Or if
big
you're
design
onboarding.
document? Like, I'll just write a technical specification.
If
and
there are
hand it
only
to the
7
engineers
people, it
and
doesn't really
we're good.
matter
But no,
much.
I think the publisher expected to see
Wait,
one, so
supposed to be-
I ended up spending, I don't know, like weeks, maybe a month, putting together this huge, like 60-page design document, and then nobody ever read
Wow.
it after that, which is exactly what I imagined was going to happen.
Because it comes out of date the second someone has a conversation after.
Yeah, basically. You know, that, or it's like people they don't want to read through some giant, overly verbose document. They just want to be handed the piece of information.
Wow, this
that
place
they
is
need.
huge.
So we keep things like very loose and streamlined at Crate. I also try to hire people who I think understand the types of games that we build. Like, especially with an engineer, if like, you know, an engineer has experience working on strategy games or an ARPG or an RTS, whatever, they have kind of an understanding of like how things should function in the game. So you don't have to spell it out in infinite detail.
Oh wait, I'm going the wrong
You
way.
can, you know, be like, hey, you know, make the UI work like it does in this game, and like they know what you're talking about, or the unit control, or you know, whatever it is. They kind of have a sense for how it should feel.
Here?
And you may have to, you know, play test it and you know have some back and forth, but you don't have to like create this extremely detailed technical.
Wait, I went in the
specification of how
wrong
something should work.
area?
And a lot of times, like we may
Maybe it's
just use
downstairs.
Discord for communication. So, like, you know, say I have this new feature I want to add to Farthest
Uh-oh.
Frontier. You know, I might, depending on how complicated it is, do an actual like write up in a document, like of this is, you know, how basically it should work, and hand it to the engineer, and then we'll talk about it. Or sometimes if it's like something that's more simple, I'll just be like, hey, you know, it would be cool if this happened in the game. And they'll be like, okay, you know, well, okay, what about this? How exactly do you want that to work? Or what should happen in this case? And we'll just kind of chat about it a little bit. And they'll say, all right, I'll give it a shot. They'll check it in, say, hey, you know, I checked this thing in, take a look at it. And then I'll say, hey, this is awesome. Or this is almost awesome, but it'd be, you know, if you could like fix this part, or it'd be really cool if it actually did this. And actually, I think that whole back and forth is a huge part of what helps us make games that I think are, you know, have a little bit more like character than what you get out of some of the bigger studios. Because, you know, going back to like Ironlore, where you have to sign up for a milestone list of what you're going to do, there's not a lot of room for like organic ideas to emerge. Whereas for us, where I have kind of like oftentimes a high level idea of what I want the game to be, and based on what genre it is, I know that there's like a certain list of features that players are going to expect in the game that we'll need to tackle at some point. But a lot of the time, you know, it's like I am just constantly, you know, working with people to implement ideas and then playtesting the game. Like I playtest the games all the time. And because I'm playtesting it and seeing these ideas as they come online, it just naturally leads to other ideas that I don't think that you necessarily have when you have to plan out everything in advance on paper.
I see. I guess it helps in this case because it's a relatively small team and you're a very focused game director. It means that a lot of the communication can happen in your head to some extent. Like if you're holding the vision of it, you can individually work with people on features, but they don't need to necessarily work with each other on features in a way that would require more formal specifications and stuff, because it can come through you, you know, or at least you can mediate that stuff.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there are limitations to that, and there are downsides. Obviously, if we were a much bigger company, things wouldn't be able to necessarily work like that.
That's very interesting. I could talk about the structure stuff all day. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was to do with the multiplayer way that you've structured, or the multiplayer or lack thereof in the initial version of Grim Dawn. So, like Tiding Quest, it's primarily a single-player game that has optional co-op play, and compared to online-only games, obviously this brings benefits for players, like not having lag or disconnects, and being able to play when there's no internet connection like on a plane. What were the biggest impacts of this decision from your point of view?
I mean, it's really hard to know, because we only have this, we only have what we did. It's hard to compare it to what we didn't do and what might have happened had we done things differently. I mean, it's like this thing, the whole thing with marketing, where you put a bunch of money into marketing, but you don't really know how much of an impact something would have had if you had done this or that. Can't A/B test it in a different reality. But that said, I mean, we did have a lot of people show up early on in the development of Grim Dawn and say, hey, this game's going to be dead on arrival. It doesn't have secure multiplayer. Why are you even wasting your time making this? And obviously those people were not correct. We went on to do very well for ourselves. And I think a lot of times, and I was one of these people early in the days, like when I was playing Age of Empires competitively, I never played the campaign or anything, and I just thought, me and all of my friends who play Age of Empires, who coincidentally were all people I met while playing PvP online, that's all we do is we play PvP online. So that must be what everybody does, because my sample size is only these people I met playing, PvP. And then as I started working with the developers, they really disillusioned me of that by, releasing the stat that something like, I think it was 15% of people ever logged onto the Microsoft Gaming Zone to play online. And I was just, blown away. I couldn't believe it.
I heard a similar number for Diablo 2, where 100% of people I talk to say they played on the secure servers, but yet when you hear the stats, it's like you say, the vast minority of people played on the secure servers, and the average consumer purchased the game, put the CD in their drive, played it, and had a great time, and never went online.
Yeah. I mean, that, or, a funny thing that I really thought about back in the day a lot when I was playing tons of Diablo 2, is that for a long time, me and my buddy we would play on the, secure servers, just with each other. And there were times where we were always playing on hardcore mode, and there were some times where really devastating things happened because we hit a lag spike.
This map is so unhelpful.
And at some point, I just realized, why are we playing on the secure server? There's no benefit to us. I mean, we're buddies who are playing in the same office. We're not cheating, and we're not playing with any other people. So why not just play on an open BattleNet? And I think that's the reality for a lot of the audience. However, on the flip side, there is a perceptual thing where even if you're not competing in leagues or whatever, if there's no ranking system, you do want to have this feeling that there is this kind of integrity to what you're playing. That you're playing in the official version and that what you're accomplishing there has a certain level of integrity because the rules are enforced and you couldn't have cheated. Other people that you're playing with, that they're not cheating. And so even if
I cheated on Open BattleNet. It was fun.
Kind of ranked play, or you're not playing with random people on the internet, I think that it does have an appeal to players. And then on top of that, I think even for people,
I would one-shot everyone in PvP.
It's hard to ever quantify how much of an impact.
I was a horrible cheater on Open BattleNet.
Hardcore multiplayer audience have on generating additional word-of-mouth sales and hype game for the more casual audience. So that's something that I'm sure has impacted Grim Dawn to some degree, but it's hard to really know
It's a bit weird.
what that degree was. And the reality is I didn't make a decision to have an open multiplayer mode. That was made on Tiding Quest, and I actually voted against it. And our publisher THQ was adamant that it was a waste of time to create secure multiplayer. because they just, according to their data, was such a small portion of the audience. I don't know. They just projected that they didn't think it was worth the investment. So when I started Grim Dawn, I had inherited the Titan Quest code base, and being a couple man operation originally, like, we didn't have the resources or the time to rewrite the entire, re-architect the engine to be authoritative. So that, it wasn't really a decision that we made, and I might have made it differently otherwise, but at least at that time, and part of it is just because that's what appeals to me as a player. I don't know that it makes sense from a business perspective. I just just something I think is cool and it'd be cool to have. But nonetheless, like, it's it's totally feasible to be successful, of course, without that. Just depends how you budget things and who your target audience is.
Yeah, maybe the best approach, if there's enough resources for it, might be a hybrid thing where you both have secure online play for those who want it, but you also have an offline version for those who prefer that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally a fair way to do it.
There are certainly advantages to the secure online play in terms of it's prevents piracy. It makes, as you were saying, it verifies the fact that people have actually accomplished what they say they're accomplishing. It feels really real. But then, for many people, single player also feels real. They don't realize it shouldn't feel real. Why should I suddenly think about cheating? I'm just playing by myself or with my friends, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think that there are certainly advantages to both, and games could be, with the right resources, architected in a way that supports both. Their business model pending. And the reason why I find Grim Dawn fascinating here is because, as you say, circumstantially, you were forced into a situation where you didn't have secure online play, but then you did incredibly well despite that. You provided such a good game experience for so many people, sold so many copies, and do you think this might be because most of the other action RPGs were trying to do secure online play, so they had the always online stigma and the issues associated with that, lag and desync and transactions and so on?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say that I feel that we necessarily pulled a lot of audience from other ARPGs who were dissatisfied with them. I mean, clearly there's some degree of that. Like, you do hear people who are grumbling online about, connectivity issues with various, like, ARPGs, and I'm just a single player person. Why should I be forced, to play online? But, and ultimately I think that it's more that it's just a big genre. Like, there's a huge player base. And one of the things that I think is very hard for more hardcore players to understand, and this is me back in the day, is that the average person doesn't play a game very long. Like, you have these people who are, and it's funny because we get these like negative reviews periodically on Grim Dawn from people who've played like thousands of hours, and then we'll say something like, wow, this game was fun for a long time, but eventually I ran out of things to do. And it's like, yeah, like, the game is not meant to keep you occupied for the rest of your life. But some people, like, they have that mentality. They don't want to start a new
Steam
RPG or whatever it is if they don't think that they can
God
put like
damn it,
10,000
Steam.
hours into it.
10,000 hours for $50 is a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it's a very good deal. But the vast majority of the audience, like, they're going to play the game for 10 to 50 hours, and they're going to have their fun, and then they're going to move on and do something
Steam
else.
reviews are so dog
And
shit.
I think that, that's a big part of where, like, Grim Dawn has seen success is because people, the vast majority of the audience is not, like, tied to a specific ARPG. They may play them all at one point or another. But then after that, they may only continue, they may move on to different games, or they may just continue playing the one that they really resonates with them. And I look at it a bit like, the book industry. There's thousands of books come out every year, and part of the reason that there's a market for thousands of books is because people read them for a limited amount of time, and people have different, specific ideas of what makes the perfect book or the perfect game for them. And the fact that we're a small company and we don't need to have, 50% of the market to be successful means that we can make a game that more specifically caters towards a subsection of the overall audience. Because really the ARPG audience is not monolith. It's made up of like a bunch of different groups who all want sometimes mutually, conflicting things in the game. So being like more single player oriented and being like oriented towards a more, I think, slightly more hardcore single player audience, has allowed us to carve out a niche where, we're able to, I think, more directly cater to that segment of the market than, like a Diablo, which is trying to be everything to everybody, and ultimately, they have to make some compromises. Things get watered down a little bit for one group or another.
There's a topic related to this that I wanted to discuss, which is the concept of not having to worry about an online economy when you're balancing the game. And I don't just mean, oh, it's nice to have less work to do because I don't need to balance an economy, but a big issue I faced when balancing Path of Exile is that if there's a single way to play that is most rewarding, it starts to affect everyone in the game, even if they don't want to play that particular playstyle themselves.
Yeah.
Because if other players who are playing the flavor of the month build or whatever are getting more rewards per hour played, then those players become relatively richer, and the prices for desirable items can be bid up by them. And so items become out of reach for players who aren't using the optimal strategies. And so we have to try really hard to make sure that there are many roughly equivalently powerful builds available. Whereas I imagine if you're balancing for single player and you make something overpowered, players, they're not harmed by the fact it exists in the game. They can play it or not. How do you find?
I think that the concept is similar. It's just the consequence is less severe. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I had not thought about that one group, participating in like online, bidding for items can drive up the cost and make it inaccessible for others. That's certainly a much more severe consequence of this problem. But below that, there's the issue that players will, more. And when I say competitive, I don't necessarily mean people who are like competitive with other players, but that they play the game in a more competitive manner. It's funny because like whenever I play Diablo 2 back in the day, it's like I'm going through the game as trying to be as efficient as possible, to keep moving forward, to level up as fast as possible. And the reality is like there's no timer. I'm not competing against anybody. It doesn't really matter, but that's just my mindset. It's how I play games. And so, I'm the type of player who's always looking for an advantage or an increase in efficiency. And I think a lot of people are driven by that. And the danger is when you have mechanics or aspects of the game that you feel that you must participate in to have the best advantage, but which are detrimental to your fun. And like an example of that, this is probably a controversial one for many players, because I know some people are going to have, totally different thoughts on this, but I found that when I was playing Diablo 2, at some point, after hundreds of hours of playing, I was just starting to lose my interest. Well, hundreds, more like thousands. So, but it was after I played like a lot of Diablo 2. I felt like the magic of the game had diminished for me somehow. I just didn't feel as connected to the game. I wasn't as immersed in it. And I thought, well, maybe the time has finally come. Maybe I have played too much Diablo 2. It's time to move on. But I realized that part of it is that I always had the minimap overlay open. And it had gotten to the point where I was not even looking at what was going on the screen. Like, I was just playing the minimap overlay. And I think it really diminished the game experience for me. And it's part of the reason why on Grim Dawn, when you open the larger map, it kind of obscures your view. We never made a transparent overlay. And, some people complained about it. But it's the type of thing where I feel like to some degree you're almost saving some players from themselves, because if you can just look at an overlay where you're basically almost playing Pac-Man, look at line drawings, some people will do that because it's the most efficient way to play. And I think it's a similar thing with like builds and itemization. Even if I think it's easy to think like, if it's single player only, then you don't have to really
Wow, look at that
worry
guy.
as much about balancing. And
He
maybe
looks
it's
pretty
true,
crazy. Look at that.
because again, it's not as consequential. but I still think it's very important that you can't allow
Why does that have a
certain
health
things to be
bar?
wildly overpowered. Otherwise, you know, certain people feel like there's an established meta and only these builds are really good, and they're wasting their time if they play something else. So I don't think it's quite as critical, but I do feel like, you know, always there is this desire to have, you know, variety at the highest
Why does that
levels
have a
of
health
play.
bar?
The one thing I think is probably beneficial for being in a more offline and, you know, single player environment is that when you do make balancing changes to stuff, it doesn't hurt quite as much for people.
They can play the old version or whatever if they don't like that change, or
Not necessarily that they can play the old version. I mean, they always could because we do have modding tools. But it's more that it's not disrupting some kind of, you know, competitive play,
Right.
direct competitive play in a you know, in a ranking system or anything like that.
so you haven't swapped someone's shoes in the middle of a marathon here.
Yeah, that and just like being not being like a free-to-play game, we don't have to have like quite as intense
Oh, I died?
a grind or quite like plan
Oh,
for
wait.
as much kind of like long-term gameplay.
Hold up, hold
We
up,
can
hold
make it easier for people to
get that
access
thing.
like the highest level items. Which isn't to say that it's easy. I mean, you still have to put in, you know, a lot of hours, you know, farming stuff potentially, but like I don't think it's quite to the degree of how long it takes to really max out a character in a game like Path of Exile.
You mentioned modding, and like obviously an online-only game like Path of Exile can't really support player-made modding tools because there's one authoritative version of the game running on the developer's servers. But Diablo 2's offline mode had a huge modding
There we
scene,
go.
even though it wasn't officially supported, and my understanding is Grim Dawn does as well. What are the costs and benefits of offering official modding tools to the community?
I mean, you know, obviously you have to create these tools. I think that a lot of times people don't understand how bad some of the tools are that we use in development. And oftentimes there's kind of like an arcane knowledge required to use these development tools. But when you know, want to make them accessible to people for modding, you have to do a bunch of, you know, cleanup and try to make things a little bit more intuitive and develop the UI a little bit better. So there's a little bit of cost there, although I think that cost has ended up, you know, benefiting us in the long run because now we get to use those tools. And as we've gone on to make, you know, a number of expansion packs, it's made development for, you know, internally a little bit easier. I would say that, you know, one of the biggest issues though is whenever you're releasing, you know, a patch or an expansion, there is the potential to break people's mods. And then oftentimes you even will end up with various bug reports that are, you know, a result of conflict with mods, but players don't realize it, and it can waste a lot of time trying to dig down and figure out what exactly is happening, and then you discover, oh, you know, that this person's running, it could even be a very innocuous mod. Like a lot of the mods people make are just, you know, tools for the game for like inventory management, or they want to change the itemization, like the color tags for items, stuff like that. But you know, on the flip side, and again, it's a difficult thing to measure, but I think it, you know, has provided some increased longevity for the game. As like we had, some people made this amazing Diablo 2 mod, like basically like recreated Diablo 2 and Grim Dawn, which was really cool. Or there's a group that basically runs like you know, a PvP league, and they, you know, created a mod to facilitate that. You know, which is funny because like even though we don't have a secure architecture, you know, these people kind of like will sort of self-regulate it by, you know, observing, you know, the games and whatnot, the PvP outcomes, and determining whether, you know, it was fair or not.
That's cool. Have any mods ever influenced the development of the core game and its expansions?
Yes. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember at one point that there were mods for certain things that were sort of like quality of life mods, and that at one point I think I remember us thinking like, you know, this is really cool. A lot of players are enjoying this. Like we should just make it an official part of the game.
Did you ever see a noticeable increase in sales of the base game when a big community-made mod came out that was popular?
No, I wouldn't say so. And I mean, it's probably hard to track because I think that, you know, first it's mainly just people who already own the game end up playing the mod. I think that if there was an effect on sales, it would probably be more so that it kept people playing the game longer and then therefore increased the attach rate for DLC,
Yeah, I see.
expansions and whatnot.
Yeah, and of course, more people playing is more word of mouth, which means more incidental
Right.
sales and
Yeah.
slightly.
But I think yeah, I mean, I think it's the type of thing though where it happened over such a long period of time that, you know, it doesn't create like a noticeable spike or anything.
Yeah, I see. For Path of Exile, we found that a 3 to 4 month release cadence was best to keep players constantly engaged while giving them enough time to build their characters and play enough of each league. For a
Yep.
live service game that relied on ongoing player retention to make money, this was of utmost importance to us. I did a GDC talk a few years ago about this exact topic of trying to work out the right cadence, and that was a big deal for our business model. What
Yeah.
did you find worked for your expansion? Did you intentionally have a specific cadence you were trying to hit?
No, we didn't. So I don't know. Honestly, I can't tell you what you know the best cadence would be. I mean, certainly, I do think that, you know, it makes sense to try to, you know, keep updates happening on a regular basis. I think that it would have been beneficial if we could have put out more DLC, you know, closer together. But I mean, the reality is, like, we're a small development team. You know, at some point, you know, it's like after the release of Grim Dawn, I had no idea what to expect for the sales of the game. You know, back in the retail era, you know, you get some big spike at launch, and then your sales would dwindle pretty quickly once you lost your shelf placement. And nowadays, obviously, that's totally different with digital storefronts. But, you know, as my first digital game release, I had no idea what to expect from it. And so we planned things with the expectation that sales could just drop off at any time. And so we started another project. In fact, got it rolling a little bit before the release of Grim Dawn. You know, just had a couple engineers plugging away on what would become Farthest Frontier.
Right.
And then because we had to, you know, move some development resources onto that, it, you know, diminish the rate at which we could potentially put out expansions for Grim Dawn once we saw that, you know, hey, this thing's actually selling really well, and we probably, you know, we should keep supporting it with additional content. But I don't know. I mean, it's you know, all of our expansions have done very well. People seem to mostly return for them. You know, we're at the point now where the game has just kept selling for longer than, you know, we could have ever imagined. And, you know, I mean, what is it, like 3 years after our last expansion where we said we're not making any more expansions for Grim Dawn, here we are working on a new expansion. And part of the reason that we said we're never working on any more expansions is because, you know, unfortunately, due to the way that things are set up, it is increasingly difficult, you know, increasingly complex to add in at each new expansion. We have to, like, make a new version of the world, and, you know, there's all these different you know, skill class permutations that, you know, you have to worry about balancing and creating synergies and itemization for. Really, the way that we did items is one of the biggest issues prohibiting us from adding additional character classes to the game, which otherwise, like, would be low-hanging fruit. Like, that would be a really easy way to add content that would have a lot of replay value. But because the way itemization works, we have to create, like, you know, hundreds of items to, you know, support all of the different, like, plus skill stuff for all of the different mastery combinations. So, you know, that kind of caused us to drag our feet putting out expansions, along with the fact that we're just really burnt out from working on ARPGs for so long. But yeah, I don't know. In general, I would say I think, you know, every 3 to 4 months sounds like a nightmare to me. But I think, you know, that's probably beneficial for sales. You know, given the pace that I would like to work at, I feel like every 8 to 10 months or something maybe is good. But yeah, I don't know.
I haven't spent much time reading historical feedback from your community, so I'm honestly not sure what the answer to this question is going to be, but given that many of the other major action RPGs that people would have been playing were live service games that live or die based on the frequency of their updates, did any members of your community base their feedback or expectations on a different release cadence than the one you're actually doing? Like, did you get people who cropped up after 3 months and said, this is a dead game, and that kind of thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I don't know, to some degree that's unavoidable. Like, we're here actively working on Farthest Frontier, trying to get it out of early access, and we'll put out a massive update, and then literally a week later, people will pop up and be like, is this game abandonware? Is this still in development? It's like, we just put out this huge patch and new features, like a week ago. So I don't know, I think that it's just unavoidable that that's going to happen, but the majority of the audience doesn't really care. And in fact, in some ways, I think we're just really moving away from that culturally. Like, I think for, older people, there is more of this, we grew up in a time where releases were further apart, where companies typically stopped working on games after, a few months after a release. And, here we are, almost 10 years after the release of Grim Dawn, and we're now releasing a new expansion. That never happened, 15 or 20 years ago. And part of that was just because of the way retail worked, where things disappeared from store shelves, and it was very hard, to convince a distributor to carry, an expansion or something for a product that came out 10 years earlier. I think also we were always chasing graphical improvements 15 or 20 years ago, and now we've gotten to this point where the audiences have become sort of agnostic to graphics to a degree. My kids started out playing Minecraft, which is not exactly the king of high fidelity graphics, and so coming from that, it's like their expectations for what graphics need to be are totally different than mine. They don't have this coupling of good graphics means that it's going to be quality gameplay that I think existed for a lot of us, way back in the day. And then games just remain on the storefront forever. And especially, I think, younger people they're not as time sensitive about what's trendy or not right now. My kid the other day, my teenager was like, oh, Dad, how do you know who Eminem is? This is some hot new artist. And I'm like, dude, he's older than I am. Eminem's been around forever. That's how I know who Eminem is. But they don't care. They'll go back and listen to, binge some artist who was popular 20 years ago. Or my kids will sometimes play these pretty old games. I'm like, how did you find that? How did you get into that? And it doesn't seem to matter as much to them whether it's the hot new thing or not.
That is really very interesting. That actually matches with my experiences talking to kids these days as well. And, the graphics point is a great one, because when we were growing up, as you say, each generation of games would have better graphics, and that's a way you knew it was the hot new thing. And these days, half the successful games are ones where the developers have intentionally picked some style that fits what they're trying to do, as opposed to just pushing, I want to spend an extra 100 mil on this game, please. Which some people are doing, of course, as a way of signaling it's the latest generation of Call of Duty or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's room for both of those approaches, but, 15 years ago there was only one approach, and, nowadays it's totally different. I think that, there's a huge market, and that market has different people have very different sensibilities, and, things just work differently.
So when you release a new expansion, which is topical because of course you've got one coming up soon, what do you feel from a marketing point of view actually moves the needle on awareness?
I have no idea. It's funny because when I launched Grim Dawn, I just didn't have any money for marketing, so it wasn't something I had to spend too
Give me a second here. Let me move this up here.
much time thinking about. We we made sort of like, you know, grassroots efforts on social media and whatever. But ultimately, I just didn't think too much about it. We just kind of plopped the game out, and somehow it took off. And, you know, in retrospect, now I look back and I think, man, if we'd had, you know, some significant marketing budget to put into the game, you know, how different might things have been? How differently would it have performed? Would we, you know, have sold a lot more copies in total, or would it just have front-loaded more of those copies and the game would have done the same in the end anyway? You know, it's very hard to tell. I mean, the big thing I would say moves the needle is getting featured on Steam. And so to my thinking, the major purpose of marketing is to front-load sales that maybe would have happened eventually anyway, but to do so in such a way that, you know, you get a big feature on Steam, and then that attracts attention that you may not have otherwise gotten. You know, it's funny because still, like 10 years after release, we occasionally have people saying, like, "Oh, Grim Dawn, where did this come from? I never heard of it." But they're big action RPG players, which, you know, to me, I find mind-boggling. Like, if you're a big action RPG player,
is that it?
Wouldn't you just go online and say, "What are the top action RPGs?" Or, you know, look up action RPG on Steam, and it seems inevitable that you find Grim Dawn, but yet somehow some people have still managed to not discover that a game exists.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there is some additional marketing we could have benefited from, and I think, you know, those Steam features are a very tangible impact. But other than that, I'm experimenting with things now for the Farthest Frontier release. Like, we're putting a bunch of money into an influencer campaign, but it's like, I have no idea if that's a good investment or not, you know?
Yeah, anecdotally, and based on my experience, I think that is helpful. Of course, you know, having a high-quality game is the most important thing, but from what I've heard, Farthest Frontier is very enjoyable, so that should go well, hopefully. When are you planning to release it?
The 23rd of October, so it's coming up quick, yeah.
How about the new expansion for Tiny Quest? What's your rough timeline like on that?
You know, we're always bad at estimating when things are going to happen until we get pretty close.
I mean Grim Dawn, not Tiny Quest.
I assume that's what you meant. But, yeah, I don't know, we're thinking, like, early, like, first half of next year.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cool. And it's interesting because it also, it sort of develops one of the civilizations. Like, as you play through Grim Dawn, you encounter the remnants or ruins of certain civilizations that existed in the world. And so this expansion is going to help really flesh out one of these civilizations that had only previously been kind of alluded to. And then that's going to segue into an RTS that we're building, which is still a long ways off, but it'll be set in a verse, and it will. Yeah, it will include like a couple of these Grim Dawn civilizations as playable races.
Nice. Do you think there's much crossover between ARPG and RTS players?
I actually do, and it's funny because one of these guys who was a big streamer in the RTS community. It was Giant Grant Games. At one point, put out this stream talking about, you know, why have RTSs kind of failed to thrive in recent years, and sort of combating the notion that a lot of the audience had moved off to MOBAs. He did this big survey with, I don't know, like 7,500 people, and asked, you know, other than RTS, you know, what other genres do you play? And I think action RPG was the second most popular genre after RTS.
I wonder if this is a Blizzard thing. And the reason I say that is because, like, you know, we all got into playing Blizzard games because of its super strong RTSs back in the day. And then, because there were so many good RTSs coming out of the studio, when they said, by the way, try this thing, it's an action RPG, we're like, yes, please. And then that got us addicted to those. And so there's this association where I feel of myself as an RTS player, even though it's been a couple of decades since I actually took one seriously.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. I mean, I think also there are certain gameplay parallels between them, just in terms of, like, I mean, they're both very efficiency oriented. I mean, at least for me, it's the type of player I am. You know, it's all about like you know, level progression, screen clearing in an ARPG, and that kind of aligns with the notion of like economic efficiency on RTS, and just the amount of strategizing between army composition versus character build. You know, there's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, that is an interesting comparison. These days I struggle to pay attention to more than one aspect of a game at once. Like if I'm playing an ARPG, I can focus on my character and what's happening and trying to stay alive in hardcore is hard enough, so I'm bad at modern RTSs because I can't split my attention across all the different things. So I wanted to talk about microtransactions in games very briefly. So as a primarily single-player game with an upfront purchase price, you didn't have an in-game microtransaction store, and one could certainly argue this is a good thing for players because it means the game that they buy is a complete product and they can earn both power and cosmetic stuff by playing the actual game itself without needing to spend any additional money. But it also means that you have to run your entire business on the unit sales of the game and its expansion, and you potentially miss out on capturing the full demand curve. I was going to ask how this has affected your business, but then I noticed that you did actually release some packs of cosmetic item skins that didn't provide gameplay advantages. And this is fascinating to me because it means you can compare both approaches. You've got the base unit sales of the game, and you've also got the cosmetic packs. How did those loyalist packs perform, and were they worth doing?
I mean, they performed pretty well, and they were definitely worth doing. I mean, the return on investment for those is actually pretty crazy. Like, I think the first one that we put out sold like over 1 million units. And it's, you know, not a lot of artist time in there. I mean, it probably costs like, I don't know, $15,000 maybe to make. And it's funny because, like, part of the reason that we did those, like, initially I think we were very hesitant to put out like vanity or microtransaction feeling items because we thought that, you know, that the audience, you know, might not like that, and that kind of wasn't our business model. But we just got like tons and tons of requests for it, and eventually we were like, all right, we'll try this. And we did when it was massively successful in terms of like, you know, the profitability for what it cost to make, and players were happy with it. And then people just, you know, wanted more of that. And I think there's a danger, like there's a balance. I think if we'd gone too far and started pumping one out every couple of months, I think that might have soured people on it. Felt like too much of a cash grab, you know. It's like, because it's weird. It's like you have to kind of balance like this audience demand for something with an oversaturation that eventually starts to be greedy. And I think we may have erred too much on the conservative side of that, of trying, you know, not to be greedy developers, where we probably could have put out a bunch more of those and people would have been happy. But I don't know. I mean, to some degree, it's like as a company, and it's funny because like I talk to other like people who are in like game biz dev, and like I have a buddy who's, you know, does biz dev, and he owned another studio that he sold a while back. And he's always like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? You're leaving so much money on the table. How come you're not doing ports to every console? And to some degree, part of it is that, like, you know, when you are the sole owner of a company that's done pretty well and all of your needs are met, you kind of get to this position where you're like, well, what do I think it would be cool to work on? And I mean, I think I've probably left a lot of money on the table potentially by not having like a microtransaction store, but I don't know, at the time, like that just wasn't something that I wanted to do. And you know, similarly with like, you know, porting to a lot of different consoles, like it's kind of, you know, there's some pain involved there, and there's an opportunity cost. Like if you put engineers on that, you know.
Yeah, that's actually a really good thing. You don't get into game dev because of the money. You get into game dev because you want to. If he doesn't want to make MTX, if he doesn't want to add more MTX to the store, then he doesn't have to. And he shouldn't.
Working on your next cool game idea, you know, it slows things down. And you know, I mean, fortunately,
gotta do what you
gotten to a point
love
where
doing.
We don't have to be quite as financially motivated, and we can just, you know, kind of pick and choose the things that we want to do.
Yeah, I appreciate your dramatic understatement of the pain associated with porting to consoles.
Yeah.
The maintenance of those versions. Yeah, you're completely right that there are parts of game development that are really fun and they generally involve working on the actual game itself and listening to the customers and getting them new things. And then there's the stuff that makes money, which feels incredibly boring. And if you don't need to do that, you make a lot more game and hence people have a lot more fun if you just skip those aspects of the business.
I do think like there is like some player value to having microtransactions in the sense that, you know, if they were done in a way that I think is proper, like in a more sort of restrained, conservative way, it rewards the developer for the amount of hours potentially.
What is that,
people are
scissor?
playing the game.
Oh,
And I think that
that's like a
little bit
barbershop.
like
Never mind.
a disconnect right now between developers and players, especially in the types of games that we make that are highly replayable, where you have these people who are playing thousands of hours of the game, but they've only paid, you know, $30 or whatever it is for it. And I mean, especially where you get to the point where you're starting to offer relatively steep discounts, you know, or you know, you have people in other countries and maybe they've only paid like, you know, they got the game on sale, they paid $5 for Grim Dawn, and then they play like 1,000 hours. And it's funny because like you'll sometimes see comments from players who are like, oh, you know, how come you didn't do this or didn't do that? Like it's going to decrease the longevity of the game, or what's supposed to keep me playing for another 1,000 hours? It's like, well, we already got all of the money that you're going to spend on the game, and
Rude.
And we put out a lot
Rude
of
Bowman.
updates, but at some point it's like, you know, economically, financially, it doesn't make sense for us to just keep making free stuff where you know we're not being rewarded for it. And so I think that's where stuff like microtransactions can be helpful, because it's a way for players who are really invested in the game to basically contribute more financially to the developer, so that the developer then, you know, has a vested interest in continuing development and providing more content. And it's things that like we would like to do, but it's just, you know, you can't justify it beyond a certain point if there isn't, you know, some sort of revenue involved. I mean, because ultimately, you know, it is a business, and we do have people's livelihoods to look out for.
Yeah, I see. And if the game is still generating money because of said microtransaction packs, then it does make it more likely that you, for example, invest in another expansion later or whatever you plan to do. Yeah, I see what you mean. So, if you were to start again today, like let's say it wasn't Grim Dawn, it was a new franchise, which model, premium with cosmetics or free to play with cosmetics, do you think would fit a company of your scale, and why?
I mean, part of it is free to play is just an unknown for us, and I think that it comes with a lot of sort of infrastructure that it needs to support it. Like, you know, if your game, I mean, you know, I guess I say that. And on the other hand, like people did buy, a lot of people did buy these item packs for Grim Dawn, and it's not like we have security, so there's no way to prevent people potentially from, you know, hacking the game and, you know, pirating stuff and giving themselves these items for free. But, you know, so I think most people, you know, just want to do that to support the company to some degree. And I think when it's like a Loyalist Pack DLC that comes out infrequently, I think that there's more goodwill to do that. Whereas I do think you probably do need more security as I'm thinking through this if you have built-in microtransactions, because I think that those purchases are less motivated by goodwill because people feel like it's this intentional part of the game. And so there's that aspect of it. But I mean, in general, I don't know. I guess I like the premium model. You know, you pay some amount for the game, you get a whole bunch of content. We don't have to like be making decisions purely based on like player retention. Like, how can we keep players playing the game longer? We can just focus more on like just making the game fun to play. But I do think like having potentially some degree of like cosmetic microtransactions could be beneficial. Like, you know, especially these things I think can be difficult like within RTS, where I think that audience is much more divided in terms of like how they're playing the game. Like people who are playing the campaign are playing in a very different way than people who are playing like PvP ladder. Or playing some kind of like online co-op. And I think that for like StarCraft 2, the skins that they put out were like the co-op commanders that they sold to people were a great way to allow them to have revenue off of supporting these other models of gameplay that were important to smaller portions of the audience. Whereas without that, it's like then you have to think about, well, how much time can we, resources can we really justify to providing, these different gameplay modes when it's not what the core audience is, what 70% of the audience is engaging with.
I see what you mean. I was thinking that another concept here is that if someone was to make a game with a secure online economy, and you have to make the decision between free-to-play and premium, something that's not really discussed is a secure online game obviously lives or dies based on the sanctity of the economy. If everyone's cheating and botting and stuff, then what's the point of playing? And so looking at botting in particular, if a game is free, and I say this having spent a decade fighting bots in a free game, if a game is free and you ban the bots, they come back seconds later, and the marginal cost per account is whatever it takes to register a new Gmail account and get a new clean VPN IP address. And therefore, you ban 10,000 bots. 10,000 bots come back 5 minutes later, and it's a fight. Whereas, if the game has an upfront premium cost, it certainly means that it's only worth it for them to bot the game if the amount of revenue that they can get by doing that activity exceeds the cost of the game they're paying. And if the game is a substantial cost, there's no way they're making $30 of value out of it before you ban them if you've got mature tools. And so this is something that I imagine the Path of Exile 2 team is finding at the moment, comparing to Path of Exile 1, because currently PoE 2 is in early access where you have to buy a supporter pack to get entry. And so I would expect that the botting behavior were different between the two games, though I don't know that.
I mean, I think the other thing, like based on what you're mentioning, is that, even if people who are botting are then buying additional versions of the game, it's like, in a way, they're contributing resources to you to continue policing the game and removing bots. Whereas, if the game is completely free to play, it's like, at some point gets further on in its lifespan, it's like you're investing resources and trying to combat something that is just purely extracting time and energy from the game.
Yeah. You always hear these conspiracy theories about how people accuse the developers of games of banning bots at a certain cadence, like leaving the bots there just so they can make enough money, and then banning them so that you get the money when they have to rebuy the content of the game, which is obviously not something that happened in Path of Exile because the game was free. But I don't imagine it working like that, because the negative effects of having the bots are obviously catastrophic for these games, and once the economics are not there for the botters anymore because they're being banned, they will just move on to something else.
I think that the biggest reason that companies do that is because they don't want people to be able to understand how they detected the bots. I mean, at least I don't know how well this translates to like banning bots, but with hackers, it's like a big concern is if you're immediately banned after doing something specific, then you can figure out how the company determined that you were hacking. Whereas if you just compile a list of hackers and then ban them all a month later, nobody really knows what allowed for their detection.
Yeah, you can do things like ban 90% of them because that will just confuse them, right? What did these accounts do? What's special about them? Why are they still working?
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun stuff you can do to mess with people, and honestly, in a thing where it's a matter of making it too annoying for someone to keep doing, messing with them is the best way of achieving that.
It's funny that the whole cat and mouse game that is involved with that.
Yeah, it's a cool area. I enjoy that quite a lot, and it's an advantage of doing online game stuff is that you get to fight a lot of different types of abuse. Obviously there's all the bad financial abuse where people are trying to do bad things with your payment processing, and that's quite sad to have to deal with. But the game level stuff is interesting, seeing the cool things people come up with and then trying to find a good solution to that. So, since you last released your 2019 Grim Dawn expansion, you've been building Farthest Frontier, which we've mentioned a few times in this conversation. How's that going, and what have you learned about it that can be applied back to action RPGs?
I mean, it's going great so far. It's funny because I just had always wanted to make a town builder. I loved playing town builders when I was in college. And I was sad that it felt like for a while the market had kind of dried up for those. Of course, you know, as happened to me when I started working on Grim Dawn, all of these ARPGs appeared suddenly. Now the same thing I feel like is happening with the town builder genre, where there's like a million town builders coming out. And then, you know, we started working on the RTS a little while ago, and all of a sudden there's all of these RTS games coming out after none for like, you know, 10 years. But in general, like, I don't know, I initially was wondering, like, is there an audience for this genre? And, you know, as it turns out, like, yes, there definitely still is a significant audience for the town builder genre. And Farthest Frontier has done great for us so far in early access. I think we're up to like 1.2 million copies, and we've got 1.6 million wish lists. So, you know, during early access. So, I mean, by those standards, it's totally outperforming where Grim Dawn was at that point in its
really
life.
good numbers.
You know, how will that, you know, translate to long-term sales? You know, I don't know, but so far I'm pretty optimistic. And then, I mean, I don't know, as far as how does that translate to ARPGs, I don't know.
Well, it's nice you got to work on something different for a while, because you mentioned burnout and stuff, and I totally know what you mean. It's after focusing on one genre for a long time, it's nice to think about something else for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, so we have like a couple of other projects, like I mentioned, the RTS, that are in development that will sort of be the next phase of games after this town builder. But I feel like we've gotten to the point, I've gotten to the point, and, you know, my like sort of right-hand man, Zantai is his online handle, as he's known by most people, I think has finally gotten to the point where we're like, all right, you know, maybe it's time. It's time to start thinking about Grim Dawn too.
Interesting. Is there anything you can say about that today?
I mean, I don't want to, you know, jump the gun and get people too excited because it's a long ways off. But we have been developing our own new proprietary engine for the RTS, and that will be the same engine that we use for the ARPG. You know, so I think that's cool. The fact that the RTS will give us a chance to kind of hammer on this engine and refine it, and then we'll build off a separate version for the ARPG adapted for that. But when I was working on like Grim Dawn initially, we were really kind of hamstrung with the old technology that we started with, which already had begun to sort of, I think, show its age by the time that we were working on Grim Dawn. And now we're kind of locked into it. Like, once you have this existing audience that owns the game, like you can only change things so much.
Yep.
That and like, we can't go to like a new shader model or anything where we'd have to redo all of the art in the game. So it's very exciting to be able to, but to start on this new action RPG with a completely fresh engine, where I think we can really upgrade, the whole look of the game. And then, as a team, like we've just matured over the time that, we worked on Grim Dawn, and then, subsequently, like we've hired a bunch of like really top-notch artists in recent years. So I think we're going to be able to do something, that graphically is a lot more impressive than Grim Dawn. But additionally, it's also like, once you're, have released the game, you're kind of locked into the systems that you have. So there are a lot of systems that, I think we'd like to revisit and do in a little bit different way. I mean, one of the things I mentioned already was just the fact that the way our class masteries interact with our itemization makes it very prohibitive to like keep adding different class options to the game. So I think we've come up with like a pretty cool new way to do that will allow us to like more freely add in additional classes as with expansions. And I don't know, anyway, I'm pretty excited about it. But
That is exciting.
it is well, we've determined that that's what we're going to work on after this next phase of games. Like we haven't started working on it yet, so we're at least like I would say 6 years out.
Yeah, actually, this is me speculating, but if your engine starts off for an RTS, it means you'll have solid netcode by necessity for lots of units, and that's always a good thing when you're planning an action RPG.
Yes.
Yeah, which could mean just really good offline, offline multiplayer rather than online, of course, but...
Yeah. We have thought about, potentially having some secure multiplayer with Grim Dawn 2. I mean, I don't think we would, necessarily try to make it as big of a thing as, it is in like, Path of Exile or Diablo, but I think having that as an option for players to do, would be interesting because there is a certain portion of the community. I mean, just the fact that somebody made a mod to do leagues in Grim Dawn speaks to the fact that there are people who would like to do like PvP or like do seasonal runs through the game, and I think it'd be cool to be able to support that. And obviously, that's having secure online play is something that we're going to have to do for the RTS.
I think that with secure online play, the size of the player community is not necessarily an always bigger is better situation. I've observed in Path of Exile that smaller player communities and like private leagues have significantly more interesting trade behavior and economic stuff going on than when you dump the entire world in one big economy and everything is hyper efficient. And so the smaller groups of players playing together do have advantages. And so, supporting both offline and online means the only people playing online are the ones who really want to be. And, I see that as a potentially positive thing rather than forcing people who, would rather play offline having to be online.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting area for sure. So, what have you been playing recently yourself, other than the games you're working on?
Not a lot, not as much as I'd like to. I periodically play Helldivers with my kids. That's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's a blast because you just go in, shoot some bugs or robots up, and could feel like you had a good time in 30 or 45 minutes. I still play a lot of StarCraft 2. I don't know, I just it's funny because I got into that really late in the life cycle of the game. I was just so busy working on Grim Dawn, I feel like I missed like an era of gaming early on. So I didn't start playing StarCraft 2 until after Legacy of the Void came out, but I mean, I've easily, put in like thousands of hours of StarCraft 2. So yeah, I do that, every once in a while. And then, geez, I don't know what else I played. I played, what was it called? I can't remember. There was some survival. I played a couple survival games recently, but the name eludes me currently.
Right. By survival, do you mean like Rust/Ark style survival, or do you mean like Vampire Survivors style survival?
More like, so I mean, I played a bunch of Valheim a couple of years ago, and then there was another game that came out more recently. I cannot remember the name of it, but it's sort of similar to a Valheim style survival game.
Palworld.
No.
Yeah, which I honestly enjoyed myself, so that was an interesting experience. You're looking up which game it was?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's in my Steam library here. No, I can see what I played recently. I played some finals. I don't know. Oh, Enshrouded. That's what it was.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking about picking up Enshrouded.
Yeah.
It looked
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Haven't played it, but it has been recommended to me.
It's an interesting game. Like, I mean, just the fact that you can like dig through the world, I think, was very cool.
Yeah. That is cool. I was looking at the action RPG being made by Moonbeast, some of the ex Diablo 2 developers, and that game appears to have terrain deformation as well, and gives me the impression that I can dig through the world, which is pretty cool, and a very different take on traditional action RPGs.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with. Yeah, well, it's been an honor interviewing you today. I had a great time. It was a
Is
lot of
that
fun.
it?
Thank you very much.
That's the interview.
Yeah, best of luck with both the impending release of Farthest Frontier and the the final push on getting the Grim Dawn expansion ready, and then the exciting RTS and other projects. It sounds like it's going to be a good few years.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I am pretty excited about the release, and it's too bad we didn't get to talk about what you're working on. But
It'll be a while before I want to share that. There's stealth mode for the time being, on purpose.
Save the village. I thought I saved the
Thanks very much,
villages
Arthur,
already.
and,
Well, thank
yeah,
you.
What
If
the
you viewers
fuck?
enjoyed this interview, then please like and subscribe. I hope to have many more in the future, and thanks, I'll see you next time.
I'm gonna play something else after this. Or maybe just get some more work done. This game is kind of boring. I don't know what it is, it's just very... It's very... Go here, do this. And it's an MMO, but I'm not interacting with anyone. Very, I don't...
I'm not scared.
Oh god, this is gonna be a longer quest, isn't it? I'm just gonna log out here and see if it's okay. Oops. I turned on the ultimate mode. Reaper mode. Yeah, just not... It's just very... I feel myself falling asleep playing that game. Playing Guild Wars. Fun for a bit. I wanted to play Guild Wars to check out the cities, mostly. Not really do the everything. Are my butt cheeks looking? I mean, after... What is it, like 11, 12 years of game development and 3D art? I mean, it's pretty flat, I would say. If it hasn't melted into the chair by now, it's pretty flat. Oh, you mean the sculpt? Oh yeah, the butt here is amazing. It's, well, I don't know if it's amazing, but it's definitely getting there. The sculpt, indeed. Give me a sec. to find some music to play, but whatever. Whatever. Don't need music. Well, it's the internet. There's a demand for everything. You'd be surprised, Zakaria. You would be surprised. How's your procrastination going, Zakaria? I heard you're looking for an AFK game. There's no such thing. Don't you know that there's no such thing as an AFK game? It's all a lie. You've been fed lies. These are lies propagated by Deep Gamer. Deep Game Dev. Sometimes when I read topo or some boring task like that, I can use a break. Yeah, but if you're retoping, isn't it better to just get it done faster so you don't have to, like, spend forever retoping? Then you can get back to the fun part of sculpting. You can sculpt some nice ass cheeks. That'll get the blood pumping. I sacrifice my own butt cheeks so that the butt cheeks in Project Nova will look immaculate. I do this for the greater good. Chris Wilson is bald because he sacrificed his hair so that we exiles would have good MTX. I don't know if the exiles actually have nice looking hair. Maybe the witch does. The witch and the duelist probably have decent hair. The rest are kind of ragtag. You know what they always say? You can always play Warframe. That Warframe isn't really an AFK game. You can play the dating simulator that they have in Warframe. It's less hands-on. I never got that New Year's kiss with any of the Vox in Warframe. They always... Digital Exchange just wants to put me with the cat every single time. I don't know what's up. I get the sense that Canadians don't know what romance is. I still think the best AFK game for what you're describing is just sitting around in Elden Ring with the blue cipher ring on. Just sitting there waiting to get summoned as a blue. Because you can sit there and wait for hours without ever getting summoned. But you're like sitting there and you're alert, right? You're very attentive because what if you get summoned at the critical moment when a host needs you? You come in there, you whoop ass, save the day. And that's like the biggest rush ever. And you get a lot of work done. The only downside is that I feel like Elden Ring isn't as optimized as it could be. So it kind of takes a toll on your machine. Just like sitting there, racking up your energy bill. the process running in the background. Every hour increasing your electricity bill at the end of the month. Waiting to get summoned as a blue. Like a... What is this shape called again? It's like a quadrahedron or something? A four-sided shape. I should know this. I should know the basics of geometry. The basics of geometry, especially considering the field that I'm in. Rhombozoid. See. Might be a little easier to see here with metallic. Man, I miss making armor. I mean, I make armor for Exanima, right? But I miss making armor for Project Nova. It's been a while. I haven't done the steel armor yet. I need to go do steel armor. That'd be so sick. Yeah, there's like this biome here. Interesting biome. Is this also on the mail mesh? I need to go backtrack and check, but I don't think it's on the mail mesh. Or at least it's hidden underneath muscle or something like that. Configured differently. This is like the It's like that V shape that women like, except this is the female version. It's some music. Some music. Do you have any war-related movie suggestions, Zeph? Forrest Gump is good. If you haven't seen that already, it's older movie, but it's still very, very good. The Pianist is good. I like that one a lot. There's also Schindler's List. I'm actually not sure if I've seen that one entirely. I heard that one made a lot of people cry, so... Saving Private Ryan. That's also another one. All of the war movies I like are the ones where war is just awful. Oh, you mean like medieval war, not like modern war. Kingdom of Heaven or Braveheart. If you haven't seen Conan the Barbarian, that's pretty good. I only know like fantasy medieval war stuff. I don't think they really do a whole lot of historical stuff. There's The Princess Bride. There's Dragonheart. If you've seen Braveheart, you should watch Dragonheart. It's the same thing, but with a dragon. There's Dogma. You can watch Dogma. It's not medieval, but there's angels in it. It's pretty funny. I mean, there's 400, there's Gladiator. What else is there? I'm sure there's a lot, I just can't remember them off the top of my head. I mean, there's that whole era where everyone was just watching Game of Thrones. Or like that, what is it? 2000 and what era? 18? I want to say. It's like the Obama administration, so I think. It's before than that. Before then. Let's see. Go watch Game of Thrones. Watch it. Otherwise you won't get like half of the internet memes that I post. Yeah, wait until you're 30s to watch it. I watched it like when I was... When did I watch it? I want to say I was like, what? 24? When I watched it? When did like the first season come out? 2011. How old was I then? 7... 11... wait. I was 18 when the first... Yeah, I was 18 when the first episode released. I watched the first episode when I was 18. What are you doing waiting until your 30s to watch Game of Thrones? What the fuck? It's gonna be too old for you. It's gonna be like watching Blue's Clues in your 20s. The magical, arbitrary number to watch Game of Thrones. That's weird. I like the hips. This doesn't look right. Why doesn't it look right? Why? The side profile. There we go. Are you bored of being a 3D modeler, Zakaria? First you asked me if there's a good AFK game. Now you're saying Game of Thrones is gonna be a distraction. It sounds to me like you're bored of 3D modeling. You've peaked when you're young, and now it's all downhill from here. Ugh. First is AFK drugs, and first is AFK games. Next it's becoming an alcoholic, and then you're gonna spiral. You see, AFK games is the gateway drug to just spiraling out into oblivion. You play some AFK gacha game on your phone. The next thing you know, you're blind from the methamphetamines you've injected into your bloodstream. It's how they get you. You gotta watch out for those AFK games. Like, one day you're a bit bored of Retopo, so you look down at your phone. You play like 2 minutes of an AFK game. You look back up, and then you can't see anything because it was actually a drug-fueled recollection of your last known memories before you spiraled out. That AFK game I played back in 2009, it lowered my sperm count to the point of being infertile, and my testosterone has never recovered. AFK games, they do weird shit to your body. I can testify to that. As a seasoned industry veteran, you should listen to me, Zakaria. You gotta be careful with those AFK games. You gotta do as I say, not as I do. That's how it works. Likes to suck? Winner's gonna win. Indeed.
Krishna
I don't know why this is even here. I've sculpted this in, but then it's maybe it's too intense. Because it doesn't look right, but it looked right in the rough. Maybe it's too far forward. Oh, I know why it looks weird.
Shut
Proportions are off. Something's off. Waist is a little bit too narrow. I almost feel like the torso is too short, but I don't know. I guess it's okay. But yeah, it should be okay. The back needs work, for sure.
You run the tab after
Yeah.
it's done.
Yeah. I'll run the pet. angles are probably a bit too strong. Definitely something wrong with the profile as well. I need to figure out what it is. Something up with the eyes. Something is definitely wrong here. I need to figure out what it is. Might just be like the corner of the eye here. Like all weird or something. Getting uncanny valley vibes when it's 3/4. Kind of. Mostly from this angle. Why from this angle though? Oh. I may need to move the cheeks forward. Maybe they're too far back. Yeah, it's definitely the cheeks. I have to move them forward. That was definitely it. Probably the same with the brow too. Yeah. Which laundry is it? The whites? The blacks?
And also rusts.
Alright. Whoa, wrong mesh. Not do that. I think that's as high as we can make it. You know what? Let's just stop messing with the face. We'll work on the face later. Just once I start tweaking the face, the entire stream is gone. It's just I just never stop working on the face, and nothing gets done. Why is this asymmetrical? Oh, it's not. Okay, never mind. My face is asymmetrical. Also, we don't need this stuff anymore. I don't need like pubic hair. I'll just leave that in there for now though. I'm gonna take a short break here. I'll be hey Sheet Terror, how's it going? Yeah, it's going well for me. I'm taking a short break here. Gonna go get up and stretch. It's been like 3 hours no stretch. So I'm hitting 40. My next decade's 40. Should stretch. Wait, I'm back. Oh my god! I woke up and my shoulders are so freaking tight. I have like a headache because of like my muscles back here are like fucked up. Ooh, that felt good actually. Oh. Yeah, I think the front is in a good spot, except for this place here. Let's go fix this up. The neck and the back still need work. But then after that, I think I might be mostly done here. Hopefully. I'd rather not spend the rest of my entire fucking life sculpting humans. Like the most boring bullshit I've ever done. Wait, am I on the right dimension? It's a little bit too sharp. But it needs to be done. Having good human faces, I think, is one of the keys to producing a game. Without it, you won't have, well, you're producing like a kind of game where you can control a character with like AAA graphics. What happened with the neck? Why is the neck all fucked up? Whoa, the neck is like actually weird. Alright, Zakaria, take care. Have fun with Night Rain. I was actually thinking about playing some Elden Ring in a bit here. But I might just head off and stretch or something. It has almost been like 4-ish hours. You know what? I really need a stretch. I'm gonna head off as well. Take care, Sheep Terror. I know you just joined, but it's been 3 hours and a half. I think it's pretty good for a stream. I'll be back on tomorrow anyway. Bye bye.